May 1941. A storm rages in the Atlantic Ocean. A squadron of antiquated biplanes take on the war machine which the world has never seen. Bismarck.
It seemed almost incredible to me to watch these ancient-looking planes flying against this fire-spitting mountain.
और स्टेज पे है यूरोप का भविष्य.
If Bismarck succeeds in her mission, the convoy system will collapse and Britain will surrender. It really is the pivot point of the Second World War.
Disasters don't just happen, they are a chain of critical events. नमस्कार दोस्तों, मैं हूं आपका दोस्त, आपका होस्ट भामरी, लेकर के आया एक नया एपिसोड आपकी फेवरेट शो दुर्घटनाएं डिजास्टर्स का. ये शो जो आप हर हफ्ते सुनते हैं आपके फेवरेट इंटरनेट रेडियो स्टेशन रेडियो उड़ान पे, जो कि है अ फ्लाइट ऑफ लाइफ. और आज के शो में हम चर्चा करेंगे द सिंकिंग ऑफ द बिस्मार्क. द नॉर्थ अटलांटिक, May 24, 1941. 24 मई 1941. ब्रिटिश बैटलशिप HMS George V. Commander-in-Chief of the British Home Fleet, John Turvey, is on the most critical mission of his life, to sink a ship which is so powerful that it threatens Britain's own survival. Bismarck, the flagship of the German Navy. On her maiden voyage, she sails with cruiser Prince Eugen. Tovey sends a fleet to cut them off. Leading is battle cruiser HMS Hood, जो कि एक सिंबल है of Britain's ocean supremacy, a pride of the Royal Navy.
She was a beautiful looking ship. Everywhere she went, I mean, she attracted the attention, and we all loved her.
Commander of the Hood is Vice Admiral Holland. With the element of surprise, Holland is confident of the success. Bismarck और प्रिंस होयगन जो है तकरीबन 30 किलोमीटर उत्तर की दिशा में है हुड से. बिस्मार्क के ऊपर है एडमिरल ऑफ द जर्मन नेवी ल्यूटेंस, जो कि एक लेजेंड है जर्मन हिस्ट्री में, और जिन्होंने 22 ब्रिटिश शिप्स को डुबोया है इन जस्ट 2 मंथ्स. और दिन की पहली लाइट पे वो देखते हैं HMS Hood क्लोजिंग अप.
Zwei schwere Kreuzer. Halten weiter Fühlung.
Schnell! Verlaufen! Die Laken! Die letzten Scheiden! Schnell, die Boote in Gallen!
The Hood opens fire. Stranger Lieutenant does not give any order to return fire. It's the captain, Franz Lindemann, who takes control.
Feuer frei!
ऐसा लगता है कि शेल्स की बारिश हो रही है इन द डेनमार्क स्ट्रेट, और उसी में से एक जो है साल्वो हिट्स द हुड. It misses 6 decks of steel and hits the ship's magazine, and it detonates around 300 tons of ammunition. वो जहाज जो है 2 टुकड़ों में बढ़ जाता है और डूब जाता है सिर्फ 2 मिनट के अंदर. और इसके जहाज के डूबने से ही तकरीबन 1400 सेलर्स की मौत हो जाती है, which included Vice Admiral Holland. Bismarck जो है it sails on. The news of Hood's demise radios all around the world.
The greatest battle cruiser in the world was HMS Hood. Her complement was 1,341 officers and ratings. All our sympathy goes out to the relatives of those gallant men who lost their lives when a shell from the new German battleship Bismarck exploded a magazine.
They came over the tannoy that the Hood had been sunk, and at that time it was one of disbelief, because we thought she was unsinkable, and that there was no ship that could touch her.
It's a matter of national importance. Now, किसी भी तरह बिस्मार्क को डुबोना है. Admiral Tovey जो है, he calls upon every ship which is there in the British Navy. और British sailors के सामने एक daunting task है.
We knew that she was a formidable opponent, and most of her equipment was far superior to ours.
With 88 guns accurate over 35 kilometers, with the top speed of 30 knots and an armor over 30 centimeters thick, Bismarck जो है is the most terrifying battleship ever built. A mission to starve Britain into submission. और उसके टारगेट पे थी merchant navy vessels which were bringing supplies into Britain.
They were bringing over not only oil but food, tanks and planes from America to help us, because we at that particular time were on our own.
और ब्रिटिश ये लोग जानते हैं कि बिस्मार्क का जो टारगेट है वो ये कॉन्वॉयज हैं जो कि सप्लाईज लेके आ रहे हैं ब्रिटेन के अंदर. और इसका बहुत जरूरी बात हो गई है कि इस जहाज को किसी न किसी तरह रोका जाए. दूसरी तरफ बिस्मार्क के ऊपर द मोरल इज हाई. जो उसका क्रू है, इट सेलिब्रेट्स द सिंकिंग ऑफ HMS हुड विद एक्स्ट्रा फूड एंड सिगरेट्स. और वो अब दक्षिण दिशा में चलते हैं इनटू द अटलांटिक. एडमिरल टोवी की जो फ्लीट है वो उनका पीछा करती है. और इनमें से 2 शिप ऐसी हैं जो कि जिनके की रेडार रेंज में अब बिस्मार्क आ गई है. इट्स देयर जॉब टू ट्रैक हर थ्रू द नाइट. बट अगले ही सुबह 4 बजे टोवी गेट्स सम बैड न्यूज. ब्रिटिश क्रूजर जो है HMS सफक has lost Bismarck through its radar screens. The German battleship is somewhere large in the Atlantic Ocean.
We was on our way to intercept when we heard that they'd lost contact with her. She just slipped through the cordon and was free.
Water planes भेजे जाते हैं और जो ships थी they scour the ocean for Bismarck. और उन्हें कुछ नहीं मिलता है. Then a piece of luck for the British. सुबह के 7 बजे जो lieutenant हैं, it re-breaks radio silence. He sends an update to the German Navy Command, which is picked up at the listening stations across UK. Tovey has lieutenants back on the map. He orders his fleet back to the north and the chase is back on. लेकिन दूसरी तरफ बिस्मार्क जो है दक्षिण दिशा की तरफ बढ़ रही है towards occupied France. इसके 11 घंटे बाद भी there is no sighting of Bismarck by the British fleet. The calculations are checked and the British have made a monumental blunder. वो सिर्फ गलत दिशा में बढ़ रहे हैं. ये कुछ घंटे काफी टेंस होने वाले हैं टोवी के लिए as his ship turns around and heads south in search of the Bismarck.
The Atlantic is a very lonely big place, and it would take a hell of a lot of patrolling to find her again.
26 मई RAF Catalina plane spots the Bismarck.
It was with great relief when we got the signal to say that she'd been sighted by the Catalina flying boat.
Toby can pinpoint the German ship now. She is 18 hours from the French waters. They will never catch her in time. His only hope, the fleet coming from the north from the Mediterranean. Among them is aircraft carrier HMS Park Royal with its fleet, with its squadron of biplanes. With Bismarck only 14 hours away from safety, Toby orders an attack. और ये जो मशीन जो थी वो लाइट वेट थी and they take off in the stormy skies. बहुत ही खराब परिस्थिति में ये 1 घंटा प्लेन उड़ाते हैं. मौसम इतना खराब था कि ये प्लेन्स एक दूसरे को भी नहीं देख पा रहे थे, but they rely on the lead plane's radar. There is a ship ahead. On board the British cruiser HMS Sheffield, George Osborne looks at these planes as they descend.
All of a sudden I looked up and I said to my pal, I said they're going to attack us. And he told me not to be so daft.
Unaware about their mistake, the pilots जो हैं एक अपने ही जहाज के तरफ descend करना शुरू कर देते हैं. Torpedoes hit the water and speed towards the Sheffield.
Fortunately for us, the ones that hit had 40 pistols, which meant that the warhead couldn't explode.
Bismarck is now 4 hours closer to the French waters. Toby learns of the botched mission. मौसम और भी खराब हो जाता है और फ्लाइंग कंडीशंस जो कि बद से बदतर हो चुकी हैं और इनके पास कोई चॉइस नहीं होता है. He orders another aerial attack. जो क्रूज थे उनको बहुत मुश्किलात हो रही है to fuel and arm these swordfish biplanes on the pitching deck. हवा जो कि तकरीबन 70 किलोमीटर प्रति घंटे की रफ्तार से चल रही थी और समुद्र जो था वो बिल्कुल ही तूफानी हो गया था. शिप जो था इधर से उधर डोल रहा था पानी में. उस मौसम के दौरान ऐसी परिस्थितियों में भी तकरीबन 15 स्वॉर्डफिश बाइप्लेन्स जो है फिर उड़ते हैं उस तूफानी आसमान में. बिस्मार्क जो है अब 10 घंटे की दूरी पर रह गई है फ्रेंच वाटर से. All Toby can do is wait. It's a further 2 hours before the lead plane picks up the German ship. दूसरी तरफ बिस्मार्क के ऊपर एक गनरी ऑफिसर जो है वो सुनते हैं इन स्वॉर्डफिश को अप्रोच करते हुए.
It seemed almost incredible to me to watch these ancient-looking and obsolete planes almost hanging or standing in the air, flying against this fire-spitting mountain.
Jen Patterson is one of the pilots that day.
We'd started our dive down to 90 feet, dropped the fish, turned hard downwind. As we turned away, my observer, he looked over the side of the aircraft, astern, and saw our torpedo actually running.
A single torpedo strikes the rear end of the ship. और इसके बाद क्या होता है? Steering mechanism stops responding.
On my action station, there was a rudder indicator, and I looked there and looked, and I saw the rudder jam at port 10 and never move again.
The Bismarck is effectively dead in the water. The enormous rudder जो है stuck कर गए हैं और किसी भी हालत में क्रू द्वारा मूव नहीं किए पा रहे हैं. वो सेफ्टी से कुछ घंटों की दूरी पर ही थी, लेकिन अब जो है बिस्मार्क जो है बहुत धीरे धीरे सेल कर रही है. Lieutenant and his crew could now no longer outrun their enemies. As the reality of the situation sinks in, the mood on the board is becoming more and more depressing.
We all felt we were on the butcher's slab, and there was nothing much we could do about that.
Das deutsche Volk ist bei euch. Und wir werden schießen, bis die Rohre glühen und bis das letzte Geschoss die Rohre verlassen hat. Für uns Soldaten heißt es jetzt, siegen oder sterben.
क्रू को अब ये डर सताने लगा है कि वो बच नहीं पाएंगे. Admiral Tovey can strike now anywhere. To reduce the risk from friendly fire, he waits until the morning. 27 मई के दिन the British open fire. जॉर्ज वेल जो है वो इस लड़ाई को देखते हैं on board HMS Dorchester.
We opened fire at extreme range, something like about 16 miles. And soon were seen to be hitting the target.
Within minutes, a hit destroys the command bridge and with it, Admiral Lutyens. It is crippled, but still Bismarck is an inevitable threat. But still, Bismarck is a formidable threat.
We heard the shells go over. She hadn't got the range of us, fortunately.
The British ships close in.
We fired 250, 18 shells in that, something like probably about an hour. It closed our range from 16 miles to 2,000 yards.
पिछले 1.5 घंटे से इंटेंसिव बॉम्बार्डिंग हो रही है, लेकिन फिर भी बिस्मार्क जो है डूबने का नाम नहीं ले रही है. Tovey turns to Dorchester, the only ship left with torpedoes.
We fired 2 torpedoes at her, one which hit the Bismarck, but before we could fire the other one, she began to turn over.
The Bismarck lifts towards the port side and then capsizes.
And you could see her keel from stem to stern, which was the full length of the ship, before the stern dipped into the water and she went down.
Bismarck is gone, sunk on its maiden voyage. 2221 क्रू में से सिर्फ 153 ही सरवाइव करते हैं. सिर्फ 4 दिन के अंदर 2 सबसे बड़ी जहाज जो दुनिया की थी वो दोनों डूब गई हैं और साथ में लेके गई हैं तकरीबन 3,500 लोगों की जान. अब rewinding the events of 1941, we can see किस तरह से थर्ड राइक जो थे उनका जो प्लान था to starve Britain into submission, it was full of fatal flaws. जर्मनी की जो अपॉर्चुनिटी थी to win the war is in Western Europe is खत्म हो जाती है. कितने ही सालों के बाद नेवल हिस्टोरियन एंड्रू लैम्बर्ट जो है अब बताएंगे कि किस तरह से series of miscalculations on the part of Germany, they had sealed the fate of Bismarck. March 1941. जर्मनी को हर हालत में ब्रिटेन को हराना ही होगा to attain the complete domination of the Western Europe. दूसरी तरफ ब्रिटेन की जो सर्वाइवल है depends on supplies which are coming across from the Atlantic. Germany will sever that lifeline. The Nazi develop a two-pronged strategy.
Erich Raeder, the commander of the German Navy, worked out a plan in which the submarines would force the British to use the convoy system.
U-boats will force the ships to travel as a pack, and then the fast, stronger German battleships will sink and ambush these convoys.
So the British would be caught on the horns of a dilemma. The convoy system itself was the target. If the British stopped convoying, they will lose the war.
इस लड़ाई के शुरुआत होने से ही जर्मनी ने ये प्लान को रिफाइन कर दिया है और 6 महीने के अंदर ही उन्होंने तकरीबन 6 मिलियन शिपिंग को संक करा है. 6 महीने के अंदर ही उन्होंने तकरीबन 6 मिलियन टन्स ऑफ शिपिंग को डुबोया है और अब उनकी मेन बैटलशिप इज रेडी टू कॉज हैवॉक इन द अटलांटिक। इस मिशन को नाम दिया गया है ऑपरेशन राइन।
The original plan for Operation Rhine was to get out all of the available German heavy surface ships, the Bismarck, Durghatneyein, the Scharnhorst and Eisenhower, the Admiral Hipper, and possibly the Admiral Scheer as well.
लेकिन इससे पहले कि ऑपरेशन राइन को लॉन्च किया जाए, there is a major setback. Most of the German battleships have been incapacitated.
Unfortunately for them, the Scharnhorst and Eisenhower, their other two fast battleships, had come back from a convoy attack in the Atlantic and they'd been bombed and damaged at Brest in France and were not operational at this time. So instead of a surge of half a dozen powerful ships, the Germans end up sending out 2.
For Lambert के लिए this decision is the first in the series of miscalculations.
Having planned for a big operation, the Germans may have been wiser, with the benefit of hindsight, to have waited until they could have sent more ships out.
But Germany's confidence on their strategy overrules any sense of caution. इसी साल 1941 में उन्होंने तकरीबन 22 एलाइड शिप्स को डुबोया था और वो एकदम इम्पेशेंट हो गए। उनको ऐसा लगता है कि टोटल विक्ट्री इज एट हैंड। उनको ऐसा लगता है कि अटलांटिक ओशन में बिस्मार्क और प्रिंस यूगन जो है इतने विशाल काय ओशन में कहीं छुप जाएंगी और उसके बाद जो कॉन्वेज आ रहे होंगे अटलांटिक पार करके अमेरिका से, उनको ये आसानी से डुबो देंगी। But first they must navigate undetected around Britain.
The Germans had sent more than half a dozen missions into the Atlantic since 1939. Not one of them had been intercepted. So the Germans must have been fairly confident that this mission would get through as well.
ये एक और miscalculation है. The British are suffering from the German convoy campaign and take the threat of a powerful battleship like Bismarck very seriously.
If Bismarck gets out into the Atlantic and succeeds in her mission, the convoy system will collapse and Britain will surrender. It really is the pivot point of the Second World War.
Bismarck जो है largest battleship थी in Europe must reach the Atlantic undetected. लैम्बर्ट का ऐसा मानना है कि जर्मनी ने जो है अंडरएस्टिमेट किया था ब्रिटेन का स्पाई नेटवर्क।
Because they occupied many countries, Denmark, Norway, France, Holland, Belgium, there were many people in those countries who were only too happy to pass intelligence to the British.
और 48 घंटों के अंदर अंदर ये खबर ब्रिटेन में पहुंच जाती है। दूसरी तरफ बिस्मार्क एंड प्रिंस न्यूगन जो है नॉर्वे में रुकते हैं फॉर रिफ्यूलिंग एंड गिविंग द ब्रिटिश अ चांस टू लोकेट हर।
So the British are already fixated on finding a ship. They know it's coming. They know where to expect it, and when it puts into Bergen, it's no surprise. British photo reconnaissance Spitfire turns up right overhead and takes a picture of it.
ऑपरेशन राइन जो है फिर से कॉम्प्रोमाइज हो गया है एक पिक्चर के बाद। इस बात से अनभिज्ञ कि उनकी मूवमेंट जो है लोकेट कर ली गई है और जानते हैं दुनिया इसके बारे में। एडमिरल लुटेंस जो है he wants to reach the Atlantic Ocean undetected और मौसम भी एकदम खराब होने लग जाता है और ये कवर है जिसके की वेट कर रहे थे लुटेंस। He set sails before the Bismarck's tanks are full, gambling that he would be able to refuel later.
I think it was a very good tactical choice. Getting into the Atlantic was the important thing. He had tankers in the Atlantic to refuel from. Those last few hundred tons of oil fuel were far less important than getting through the Denmark Strait without being intercepted.
But Lutyens does not know that his cover is already blown और वो एक ambush के अंदर sail करते हैं leading and he sails into an ambush led by HMS Hood.
It was now possible to put in place a plan that would secure an intercept on either side of Iceland. The interception of Bismarck as she tried to get into the Atlantic is exactly what the British planned.
This puts Lutyens in a difficult position. उनको सख्त हिदायत दी गई थी कि उनको किसी भी तरह रॉयल नेवी से एंगेज नहीं करना है लड़ाई में। वो एक जो कॉन्वॉयज आ रहे थे उनका टारगेट कॉन्वॉयज से जो आ रहे थे, ना कि ये बैटलशिप्स। और जब हुड अटैक करती है, लुटियंस is in a terrible position. He is not able to take the correct decision what he must do. और वो अटैक नहीं करते हैं। He is undermined by a lower officer, the ship's captain Lindemann. उन दोनों के बीच के रिलेशन में थोड़ा फ्रिक्शन था, ये बात के सबूत मिले हैं।
You have to take into consideration that they saw the operation from different points of view. So the captain of a vessel is responsible for the tactics. So Lindemann was thinking tactically, while the admiral had to think strategically.
लुटियंस का ऐसा मानना है कि उनको ऑर्डर्स जो दिए गए हैं वो फॉलो करना चाहिए, जबकि दूसरी तरफ शिप के कैप्टन लिंडबर्ग का ऐसा मानना है कि जो उनकी शिप है उसका फ्यूचर उन्हें देखना है, और एक अनप्रेसिडेंटेड मूव चलते हैं टू ओवरराइड द decision taken by his senior officer.
So in the end, Captain Lindemann ordered open fire with the words, "I won't have my ship shot off under my ass."
और हुड को डुबो दिया जाता है। While Germany celebrates, Lutyens जो है अब आगे की तरफ देख रहे हैं, और वो कोई satisfaction उनको नहीं मिला है after this triumph.
What's interesting is that Lutyens, far from being elated by his success, seems to have been depressed and demoralized by it, because he realized that having sunk the pride of the Royal Navy, it was fairly likely that the British would keep coming until they'd finished.
लुटियंस इस बात को जानते हैं कि ब्रिटेन जो है कुछ भी करेगा टू अवेंज दिस लॉस ऑफ हुड।
The destruction of the Hood is a moral catastrophe for the British, but it's not a disaster that leads to downheartedness. It leads to an instant desire for overwhelming revenge.
To make matters worse, Bismarck has been damaged during the battle.
A shell from the Prince of Wales had hit her bow. She was leaking oil, and also her speed has been reduced.
जो बिस्मार्क से तेल लीक कर रहा था, उसने जो है न्यूट्रलाइज कर दिया था बिस्मार्क की एक बहुत ही बड़ी एडवांटेज को, और वो एडवांटेज थी स्पीड। लुटियंस ने जो डिसीजन लिया था कि उसके टैंक्स पूरी तरह भर नहीं पाए थे, इट नाउ बैकफायर्स। Now he must roll the dice once more.
He had to make up or come up with a decision whether to break off this operation or to go ahead.
At this critical moment, the strain between the senior officers show once again.
There was an argument between the captain of the Bismarck, Lindemann, and Admiral Lutyens about the question whether to go ahead or return to Norway.
Lindeberg wants to return to Norway. His priority is his ship. Lutyens is thinking of the greater mission. और अगर बिस्मार्क को ऑक्युपाइड फ्रांस की तरफ लेके जाया जाता है, तो वहां पे उसका रिपेयर भी हो सकता है, और वो अटलांटिक ओशन के तट पर ही होगी, और जैसे कि वो ब्रिटिश कॉन्वॉय जो आ रहे हैं उन पे भी अटैक किया जा सकता है वहां से। She would not have to navigate the treacherous Denmark Strait once again.
In the end, Lutyens overruled Lindemann and ordered going ahead, trying to reach the French ports.
For Lambert, this decision is very vital for the future of the Bismarck.
He could have gone home. He chose not to. That's a major mistake.
Lutyens ये बात जानते हैं कि वो फ्रेंच पोर्ट के पास में आराम से पहुंच जाएंगे without any further battle, even though he knows the British fleet is closing on his heels. उनको उनके ब्रिटिश फ्लीट के रेडार सिग्नल्स मिल रहे थे, but he misunderstands the capability of this new technology.
Lutyens was still hearing the radar emissions from HMS Suffolk. So as far as he was concerned, the British still knew where he was.
लुटेंस को ये बात पता नहीं है कि जो रेडार सिग्नल्स उन्हें सुनाई दे रहे हैं, they never go back to the British because their ships are too far apart. 25 मई सुबह के 3 बजे the British ships जो हैं, they lose radar contact of the Bismarck. और यही लुटेंस का चांस है to get to France safely.
He decides to send this enormous, rather rambling Wagnerian signal back to Berlin, and he gives the British a perfect opportunity to reconnect.
And then he makes a critical error. इस वक्त तक क्योंकि वो बच गए हैं, लेकिन फिर भी लुटेंस जो है वापस जर्मनी में अपनी खबर देते हैं कि वो किस सिचुएशन में फंसे हुए हैं. अपने बारे में वो कांटेक्ट करते हैं.
He's not euphoric, he's not bombastic, he's not triumphant. He's depressed. The British are still out there. They're going to get me. They're going to track me down and sink me.
लुटेंस जब ये कॉल करते हैं, he is over an hour ahead of the British fleet.
He was free and clear. If he'd not sent that signal, the British would have had a hard time finding him.
Though Lutyens' mistake is grave, the British जो है उससे भी बड़ी गलती करते हैं.
They make a basic error in showing the course of the ship, and they show her heading north when she's heading south.
Tovey is left with only one option.
They make a basic error in showing the course of the ship, and they show her heading north when she's heading south.
To challenge the most advanced and mightiest ship on the ocean, he turns his attention to aging biplanes on HMS Outroar, और वो थे the Swordfish.
The Swordfish are remarkably old-fashioned looking aeroplanes. They're biplanes, they've got fairly small engines, the cockpit is open.
और ये जो टेक्नोलॉजी के बीच में vast difference था between the mightiest and the most advanced ship and these aging biplanes becomes Britain's trump card. Bismarck की जो anti-aircraft guns थी वो बहुत ही ज़्यादा advanced थी for these antiquated biplanes.
The German gunnery officer reported that their anti-aircraft systems couldn't be put on such a slow setting as the Swordfish. They were expecting planes to fly at 150 miles an hour, and the Swordfish flew at 80. And so they were always firing too far ahead of the target. So they did very little damage to the Swordfish and shot none down.
All torpedoes are dropped, और वो रेस करते हैं towards the heavily armored hull of the Bismarck. And even the most powerful ship on the ocean has an Achilles heel.
You have to understand that the rudder and the propellers are the weak point of every ship. There is literally no possibility to protect it by armor or something like that.
Bismarck's only option is to outmaneuver these torpedoes. Captain Lindbergh orders a sharp turn towards the port side. His plan to dodge these torpedoes, but he exposes the vulnerable steering mechanism.
When the torpedo hit, the Bismarck was maneuvering, so it was simply bad luck that one of these torpedoes hit there.
Bismarck's rudder turned to port, and the fatal torpedo strikes, and it detonates behind the steering gear. और इस जगह पे जो डैमेज हुआ था, वो जाम कर देते हैं रडर्स को. The force of the explosion sends a shock wave along the length of the ship. Bismarck is now unmaneuverable.
The torpedo hit in the Swordfish strike stops the Bismarck and sets up the final battle in which he'll be destroyed. It is the turning point of the whole chase. There isn't any more mistakes that can be made. They're going to be sunk. It's just a question of how long it takes.
27 मई 1941 की सुबह, the fate of Bismarck is now sealed. 10:39 पे Bismarck slips beneath the waves. जो उसका फर्स्ट मिशन था, वो सिर्फ एक हफ्ते से थोड़ा ज्यादा ही चला. She sank Britain's battle cruiser and outmaneuvered the enemy radars. लेकिन दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी शिप, जो कि मोस्ट एडवांस शिप थी, it fell victim to the outdated, slow-moving airplanes. The operation was tuned with bad luck and fatal calculations. लेकिन एंड्रू लैम्बर्ट का ऐसा मानना है कि जो सबसे बड़ी गलती थी वो समुद्र में नहीं हुई थी, वो तब हुई थी जब बिस्मार्क ने अपना पोर्ट लीव नहीं किया था. And the blame goes right to the top. Bismarck's fate was decided by a catalogue of fatal errors, critical errors. 19 मई, 8 days to disaster. वो अपना मिशन स्टार्ट करती है विदाउट द ओरिजिनल प्लान फ्लीट. अगले ही दिन जो एलाइड का स्पाई नेटवर्क होता है, it blows the mission of the Bismarck. She fails to fill her fuel tanks. 3 days to disaster. Lieutenant जो है, he decides to go to France instead of coming home. उसके बाद वो बर्लिन को कांटेक्ट करते हैं, disclosing his position to the British. 13 घंटे डिजास्टर से पहले जो स्वॉर्डविच के साथ एनकाउंटर हुआ था, उसकी वजह से उनका स्टीयरिंग मैकेनिज्म जो था वो डिसेबल हो गया था. 10:39 पे 27 मई को बिस्मार्क जो है डूब जाती है. लैम्बर्ट के मुताबिक जो है इसका ब्लेम जो है does not lie with Admiral Lutyens. He believes that the decision lies deeper, the blame lies deeper to the Führer himself.
Adolf Hitler's intervention in the Bismarck sortie is relatively limited. He really isn't desperately interested in the Navy. He's certainly not interested in this particular bit of the war.
हिटलर की जो लड़ाई थी अब तक, it was focused totally on Europe to have the full domination in Europe by the German forces. British are the sole survivors in the West. और वो अकेले हैं. रशिया और अमेरिका ने अभी भी लड़ाई को ज्वाइन नहीं किया है. While Germany is victorious on land, Britain fights a tough battle in air and on the waves. German Navy का ऐसा मानना है कि अगर वो किसी तरह अटलांटिक पे कंट्रोल कर लेते हैं तो ब्रिटेन विल क्रम्बल. और इस स्ट्रेटेजी के लिए बिस्मार्क जो है, इट इज अ परफेक्ट.
The battleship Bismarck was the first full-scale battleship Germany had built since the First World War, so it's quite clearly a very important statement about the country and its identity. It was a symbol of Nazi Germany.
And even though Hitler appreciates the role of these bigger battleships like Bismarck, he does not approve of the naval warfare.
Hitler never understood the ocean. He was not a natural seafarer. He was, after all, an Austrian. He comes from a landlocked part in Central Europe. So for him, the great sweep of the ocean and the war on the ocean is alien territory.
And even in this point of time, defeating Britain is not his major aim. हिटलर का सारा ध्यान पूर्वी दिशा में लगा हुआ है और उनका एम है to invade Russia.
For Germany, the event of May 1941 is not the Battle of the Atlantic. It's Operation Barbarossa. Hitler is entirely fixated on assembling an enormous army and destroying the Soviet Union by the end of the year.
और क्योंकि जब हिटलर रशिया पे इन्वेड करते हैं तो he would be fighting on two fronts, the west and the east. और उनकी जो आर्मी है वो 2 भागों में बढ़ जाएगी and it would become weak also. And he wants the western front to close now. जर्मन नेवी का ऐसा मानना है कि बिस्मार्क जो है it will provide the solution.
The best way to make the British stop fighting is to destroy their convoy system. So the Navy is able to sell its pet project at a time when it just might solve Hitler's main problem, the two-front war.
Operation Rhine gets the go-ahead. To prove their new battleships, the mission starts without Hitler's knowledge. But the problem for Bismarck is that Hitler's attention is already on Russia, and the backup which this operation needs is on somewhere else.
For the Nazi leadership, apart from the Navy, they're all looking east, they're not looking west. So Operation Rhine is not going to get Air Force support that it might want. It's not going to be tied into other operations. So the Bismarck is operating with very little support, even from the submarine force.
Britain had controlled the whole empire by the mastery of on their waves. But हिटलर जो है इस पार्ट को इग्नोर करते हैं और बिस्मार्क जो है टोटली अंडर सपोर्टेड रह जाती है. And 8 days later she is gone.
then next day came the glorious news that the Bismarck had been sunk.
From the moment Churchill announced the sinking of the Bismarck in the House of Commons, there was an enormous sense of relief. This is the darkest moment in Britain's Second World War, and the successful destruction of the Bismarck is absolutely critical to overall Allied victory.
सो इसी के साथ खत्म होता है हमारा आज का एपिसोड, आपकी फेवरेट शो दुर्घटनाएं डिजास्टर्स का। ये शो जो आप सुन रहे थे आपके फेवरेट इंटरनेट रेडियो स्टेशन रेडियो उड़ान पे, जो कि है फ्लाइट ऑफ लाइफ। और आज के शो में हमने चर्चा करी थी 27 मई 1941 की घटना, सिंकिंग ऑफ द बिस्मार्क। अगर आप मेरे शो को रिकॉर्ड को फीडबैक देना चाहते हैं तो आप मुझे मेल सेंड कर सकते हैं। मेरी मेल आईडी है bhambri.r@gmail.com, यानी कि BHAMBRI.R@gmail.com। और आप हमारी वेबसाइट जो कि है रेडियो उड़ान और आप हमारी वेबसाइट जो कि है www.radioudan.com, उस पर जाकर भी अपना फीडबैक सबमिट कर सकते हैं। तो दीजिए इजाजत मुझे, यानी कि आपके दोस्त आपके होस्ट भामरी को समेटने की। आज का शो मिलूंगा मैं आपसे अगले हफ्ते ठीक इसी दिन, ठीक इसी समय और ठीक इसी इंटरनेट रेडियो स्टेशन रेडियो उड़ान पर। करेंगे हम चर्चा उस आने वाले शो में किसी नई दुर्घटना, किसी नई डिजास्टर की। तो नमस्कार, शुभ रात्रि, शब्बा खैर, गुड नाइट, गॉड ब्लेस।